Welcome to the iBook podcast. I'm April O'Leary, and this is the YouTube version of our podcast. To get the audio version, you can hop on over to Spotify or anywhere that you consume audio podcasts. We are going to jump into some really cool content, so stay tuned for our next guest. We look forward to connecting with you, and be sure to subscribe. And to start your author adventure, hop on over to o'learypublishing.com, where you can map out the entire process and see what writing a book would look like for you. Let's get started.
Welcome to the iBook podcast. I'm April O'Leary, your host, founder of O'Leary Publishing, and I'm excited today to have one of our newest authors on with me, Elliott Haverlack. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, April. I appreciate you having me on.
So Elliott is a brand new author with us, although he does have another book that was published formally in 2013.
That's correct.
So this book is hot off the press. It's called From Fear to Fulfillment, A Fight for Faith, Family, and Freedom. I've got it here. And, the amount of work, time, effort, thought, and intelligence that was put into this book is astounding, which you'll hear in this interview. But I just want to thank you first and foremost for trusting us to help you get this book out into the world. We don't take our job lightly. We take every book that we publish very seriously. Because we really believe in the message the authors have to share. And Elliott is at the top of the peak here. So we're really grateful to have you. Let's talk about your book and how it came to be an idea, because books always start from ideas and authors having a reason to want to share something new or different, an experience they had, something they're passionate about. And so what was that for you?
This is an interesting journey that this book took. It started as a COVID project, like I think a lot of people have done during this period of time that we've been living in. And I was bored. My daughter said, "Why don't you write a book?" For my grandchildren. And so I started to commit some thoughts down about it. And it was really going to be a guide for my grandchildren and other people that read it on how to have a great life and live in fulfillment in a life of abundance. And then also sharing how the philosophy that I have for that life that's available to all of us made its way into the little vignettes in my life. So I think they're stories that are, while they're very personal stories, I think you could change the names and maybe some of the topics, but the guiding principles behind the stories are going to be, you're going to find when you read this, are going to be the same in everybody's life. And somewhere along the middle of this book, the country just got into such a angry state. And I think it culminated, frankly, on January 6th for me, when I realized that we had stopped as a country loving each other, and we see each other now as the enemy. And the book morphed into a political commentary on the strife in our country and how divisive it is and how dangerous it is for our future. So able to weave all those thoughts back in together and create From Fear to Fulfillment.
Yes, and what I find so compelling about Elliott's book and the way he's presented some of his ideas, especially surrounding the political culture and environment that we live in now, which has become quite divided, is with a very intelligent, very common sense, very patriotic, but unifying message. And how were you able to do that?
Well, I think there's probably three principles, and probably the most important I'm going to put right on the shoulders of you and Heather, because Heather has a fairly strong view different than mine. And one of the things I asked her to do was push me very hard to make sure that I didn't come off sounding offensive. Because one of the things I've learned as I've aged is if I offend others, I have a very hard time influencing them. Mm-hmm. And it's been fun because some of my really good conservative friends, and I am a conservative, unashamed, by the way, have read the book already and said, "Wow, it's really good, but you didn't go near far enough." And when I explained to them that the reason of the book was I wanted all people from wherever you come from, whatever your history is, whatever your political views are, to be able to read book and say, I don't necessarily agree with Elliott, but he makes sense in the point he made. And I think it was a combination of me maturing as a human being and realizing I don't want to inflame people, but a strong influence from your team helping me avoid some of the pitfalls and buzzwords that trigger people to be upset. So bravo to you guys for that.
Well, and I think that's a good point, is that, if we take the approach in our writing to really divide people, then we're lessening our ability to impact, because there are a whole group of people who might need to hear your message, and their ears are going to be closed when you use those certain buzzwords or those certain things that have become so hot that people automatically discount anybody who uses certain terms. And it's unfortunate that in our world today, we have become so judgmental and so divided and so us versus them. And I think in your book, you've really done a great job to not do that. And probably refreshing, although you have some friends that say you didn't go far enough, but to see that, there's more ground that we share similarly as human beings than there is that divides us. And let's talk about your cover. For those who are listening and haven't seen the cover, do you want to describe it to them and tell them how you were able to come up with this idea and concept to reflect the patriotic message you have, along with the faith that you value so much?
Yes, it's really quite interesting. It's quite a journey. We started with just a number of covers that looked comforting to me, I guess would be the right word, or compelling to me. And I knew from the beginning I wanted to have a very stark American flag on my book. And I wanted to find a way to weave in a very strong faith in that book. And as we were looking at hundreds of images, and we looked at everything from barns to castles to an American flag that just so happened to be flying in a beautiful sunny day, and a cross was emboldened quite coincidentally through it. The photo on the cover is not Photoshopped, according to the person we purchased the photo through. I believe that he's being honest about that. And we did a few things to it. We straightened it a little bit, to be honest with you. So it's not exactly what it was, but the color scheme and that cross, which is super compelling to me, screams patriotism, screams I believe in God. And one of the great things about this country is you don't have to believe in God, and you don't have to believe in God to love this book. I think it's a great idea to believe in him because I'm a Christian, but I respect every faith, and I respect atheists as I respect any faith. So you're free to choose. And in this country, one of the great things about that flag and why I love it so much is it's the only place in the world where you can do whatever you want. You can worship the way you want. You can believe the way you want. And we all come together under one flag. And that's why the cover is so important to me. And it just happened to be, by the way, a beautiful day, it looks like. So
Yeah.
When I see it.
And you know what? It's funny because, as Elliott was saying, it's interesting to me that the evolution of the cover design, it becomes such a process to really find the image. And as the manuscript is being developed, how the concepts and things that we thought we want sort of shift and change. The way the manuscript is laid out shifts and change. And it's not always easy for authors to kind of go with the flow. And I feel as though you were really able to ride those waves almost seamlessly. What was that like for you to have a team of people kind of giving you feedback and input on your manuscript and on your cover? And you really seem to be able to navigate that quite well.
I've been very blessed to be an executive in 7 different companies. I've presided over 5. And what I learned was I don't have all the answers. And while I'm very convicted in my views, there are most things are not sacrosanct to me. And I listen. One of the things that people don't do in today's age is we don't listen enough. And I listen. And if someone makes a cogent argument to me or a cogent defense or a recommendation, I take it and I reflect upon it. And I'd say 9 times out of 10, I'd say, that makes great sense, because it's not cutting into my core values or my core code. And so if someone would have said to me, take the American flag off the cover, that would have been a non-starter. But
the title did change. So, initially the title, what was the initial title?
The initial title was When the Dinosaurs Roam, Life Lessons on Faith, Family, and Freedom from Recent History.
Okay.
The reason I like that title so much is that I've always believed that I myself am a bit of a dinosaur. I've thought about my ancestors, and you'd have to know my family. When you read the book, you're going to hear about my family, and these characters are going to come to life, and they're real people who were loved and loved people. And they were so peculiar in today's standards. I talk about one of my aunts who was, by her own definition, a spinster, and she looked like she came out of a 19th century play. There's nobody like that on the planet today.
Yeah.
So in her own way, she was a bit of a dinosaur, and she taught me how to sew and sew buttons on when I was 5 years old. And I sewed literally hundreds of them on, because she thought every gentleman needed to know how to sew. And I still sew to this day. Not very often, but I always had that to fall back on. And one of the blessings in my life, a little one to be sure, but I'm one of those characters now. The mortality rate of the human race is 100%. And one day I'm going to take my last breath and I'm going to be gone. And there probably won't be another Elliott Haverlack or anybody quite like me to roam these earths again. So one of the benefits of the book is everything that I think and believe is in there.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. You know what I think is so beautiful about that? You'll have to check out his Instagram, which is C.E. Haverlack. And there's a beautiful picture of his granddaughter holding up a copy of his book that he signed to her. And while she might not read that for many years, how old is she, 7 or so?
She turned 7, yes.
And, this book is a generous, 350 pages. So she's probably not quite at that reading level yet, although I'm sure she's very smart. But at some point, she will say, this was my grandpa. My grandpa wrote this. And that will influence her, and that will help her shape her own ideas and shape the world long after you or I are even on this planet anymore. So that to me is such a powerful reason for anyone to write a book. It's not necessarily getting up on any sort of charts or having, even monetary success. It's that writing a book is something that will long outlive any of us. And to me, that's really exciting.
Yeah,
so
it's quite amazing. My family is a mix. So my father came, son of a coal miner, immigrant in the United States, very, very poor. My mother came from a family of great wealth and distinction. And talking about books, I don't think I've ever shared this with you, April, but one of the things that I had that was passed down from my family was the 3rd book printed on the Gutenberg press.
Wow.
And it was passed down, I believe 1453, but I may be wrong on that day. But after reflection and thinking about it and being probably the 20th person to have it in his possession, I donated it to the St. Bonaventure University Antiquities Library, of which they graciously took it.
Mm-hmm.
Said, thank you. It's the only book we've taken this year. And it's going to be there in my great-great-great-grandfather's name, because he's the one that I was connected with, where the book came from. Where it came before there, I'm not sure. But it's going to be there for people to enjoy forever. And if it would have stayed in my safe, it probably would have deteriorated into dust, another 100 years or so.
Right.
So I thought that was the right thing to do, because I believe books are awesome history, and I think there's a book in every person. Everybody has one in them. Maybe they have 2. I think I've got 3 or 4. So I think I might be back visiting with you guys again. Another one.
I have no doubt that you do. Elliott is quite a colorful character. And I want to share a little bit about the table of contents and the way his book is laid out, because every book takes its own journey and how it sort of speaks to us, the way that it makes sense to organize the material and the ideas. And so there's really three books kind of comprising the single book with the title From Fear to Fulfillment. And each kind of sub book inside of there has its own purpose. So let's talk about that and how it was organized and how you and Heather worked together. Book one being the moral compass. So why don't you kind of talk about that and how that came about and sort of where you start the reader off at the beginning of the book.
Well, the moral compass is that virtual waymaker that guides our lives. And sadly, a lot of people haven't heard a lot about it. It's getting a lot more prominent in the last decade, I'd say, than it was 20 years ago. But it guides us through all the things. And so what the moral compass section is, here's what I believe, here's why I believe it, and here's why it's worked for me. And that's the first section.
That's a very great, succinct summary. I love it. And, you know, for you to understand here that Elliott has had a lot of success in his life. And so him sharing his moral compass with you isn't just about, you know, your next door neighbor talking about, you know, how they're, you know, haphazardly making decisions, but Elliott's been very deliberate on how he's lived his life and why he's been successful. And that's where he's showing you exactly what you just said, you know, what's worked, you know, because I want to hear from someone who has found a fulfilling life, who's had success. Those are the people I want to follow. So let's keep going. So book two being the blockbuster, what's comprised in that part of the book?
So those are stories about my life and my family. And I've always been a storyteller. I've been a bit of a joke teller. And people have marveled at my ability to weave life into a story that others would say was just kind of ordinary. And the reality is the stories aren't ordinary. We don't all look at them the same way. And so when you breathe a little life into the story, you don't have to exaggerate. There's not a word in any of those stories that's not absolutely 100% true. But they're written in a way to make sure the reader realizes that all these principles in book one live out ongoing in my life. From my early, I talk about being an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old. And I talk about what happened then. And I talk about being a 63-year-old and what's happening now, and how all the twists and turns in my life have all come back to faith, family, and freedom.
And, you know, the interesting thing about you and your story, which, you know, isn't evident from seeing you now, is that you had a lot of tragedy early on.
Funny. Yeah. I had a rough start. And my father was my best friend. He passed away when I was in high school. And I just really went through a really bad period. I call it the ice age of my life. I also coined a term called deity harassment because I was convinced that God hated me at the time. You know, those were some of the fun things that helped me get through it. And I did some really destructive things. And the interesting thing is, as much as I turned my back on God, he had me every step of the way and never let me get hurt. I mean, I suffered for sure. And I felt like I was hurting. But when I came out on the other side, there really wasn't anything that I couldn't overcome. And it's just been a wonderful life. And for me, the biggest part has been giving back. Winning's really important to me, but teaching other people how to win. And I have an interesting story for you. When we sold our business, we gave a young lady, and I won't tell you the amount, but we gave her a substantial bonus, and she was 30 years old. And she just looked at me with tears in her eyes, and she said, "How can I ever thank you?" And I said, "Well, it's your turn to do the same thing." Yeah. And I think it does. Because if we can't be decent to each other and help each other along the way, what do we have? So
yeah, And, that's really the humanity, I think, that you're bringing together in your book, is that, when you win, you pay it forward and help others win. And then when they win, they help and pay it forward for others to win. And the more we can all think that way, we're all on the same team together. There's one planet, there's one, human race. And it's not, if I win, someone else loses. It's if I win, I get to help others win.
I like to say it's an incredibly growing pie where we can all feast off of the growth that we all create together. So we're not slicing it up and I have to have a bigger piece than you have to have, because it's going to be bigger tomorrow than it is today.
Yeah. So the book 3 is your commentary, and that comprises the last 22 chapters of 40, which 40 being a significant number, as we've talked about. But in the commentary section, let's talk about some of the things that you talk about in there. And is there one that sticks out that you'd like to discuss and share with the listeners today?
There's so many of them in there. Let me think. Certainly, the one that I find most empowering is the one that's called The Humble Hero. And it's about a gentleman that I've never met, and I never will meet him. But he served in World War II, the Korean War, and in the Vietnam War. And he was in battle in World War II, and he was in battle in the Vietnam War. And I didn't put this in the blog because I didn't think it was fair, but I will tell those on the podcast, his daughter found the medals in his Depends diaper box after he died. She had no idea he'd earned a single medal in his career in the military. And then when she found them, she went and researched them and went to the War Department, and she found out everything her dad had done in 40 years. And it's an amazing story. And I don't know even 2% of it, but I know enough to be so inspired by it. And I say to myself, because my own father, who served in World War II, and his 2 brothers never spoke about their service. And I learned after my dad's death that he endured horrific things when he was in Italy and in Northern Africa in World War II. And he sent every penny home to his family because they were struggling, because they were counting on him to work to help them eat. And these people who had only been in this country but a few years all volunteered to serve the country for the greater good of the world. And we need that today, whether it be on the field of battle or be in the field of medicine or anywhere else. We need it all together because we're all one human race working together. And, some people say to me, well, why the United States? Why is it so much better? And I said, you'll have to ask God that. He's the one that did it. But I believe that despite our blemishes as a country, we're the best hope that humanity's ever created. And when you think about it, it's really quite interesting. And there's a part in the book about my beliefs on history and the history of the United States and how insignificant we are from a geological perspective. And it's really quite fascinating because there's never been anything like it before. And so I'm a big believer in to whom much is given, much is expected, given this great stewardship over this great country, and we have to protect her. And in doing so, then we as a country have to get better and pay it forward and help all the other countries along. And I'm a big fan. I'm a patriot.
I'm a big fan. I like that. I'm a big fan too. And, we won the lottery just by being born in the United States, I believe, at this time in history. I think about just 100 years ago, the opportunities that, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to work together probably, because the ability to even publish a book was so severely limited at that time. And thanks to the internet and the technology is now available, and the distribution channels are available in ways that they never were before. And so people like you and like our other authors have the opportunity to share their message in a way that's much wider than ever could have been possible, even 30 years ago, probably. So to wrap up, I really want to say thank you for trusting us with your message and for trusting us to help you get it out into the world. I want to talk about your book launch a little bit because you had some good success with that. And we had a really great night doing a Zoom book launch. Elliott knows people all over the place. And so we thought it would be better to do a virtual book launch rather than a local book launch so that we could include more people. So let's talk about how that event went for you and what you enjoyed about your Zoom book launch.
Well, I found it interesting, a couple of things. First of all, it was a great event, and I was shocked at a couple of people who I didn't even realize were going to be there or on there. And one in particular, I didn't even recognize. I hadn't seen this person in over 20 years. And so it was really humbling to have them join in. The other side, on the not so pleasant side, was there were a lot of my friends that were afraid to come on. And they said that they thought they might be canceled for being on a patriotic book launch. And I just said, that's really sad. That's the reason I wrote the book, is so that we don't feel like we have to be canceled because we have a different opinion from somebody else. Yeah. Look, there's so much hate in the world, and we just need to give love a real try. And when we love each other, despite our differences, it goes far, far better. Mm-hmm. But it was a great event.
And I will say, I'm going to give you props here because you did achieve a #1 new release status when the book launched.
About that.
Very excited. And that's a huge, huge feather in Elliott's cap. And it means the book is getting out there and that people are seeing it right away. He also has signed copies available on his website. So if you want a handwritten autographed copy sent directly to your door from Elliott, they can get that it's cehaverlack.com, correct?
Correct, yes.
Same as his Instagram handle. We'll have that in the show link.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everybody know that it's important to me that you know that we're donating all the profits to charity. We're partnered with Paws and Stripes. They're a wonderful charity. I'll let you research it. We don't have time to get into the details of that. But we're doing a promo now where we're going to not only give all the profits, we're going to throw an extra $5 in the pot for them as a little Christmas gift for them between now and Christmas if you order the book on cehaverlack.com. And they've been very, very gracious and been a good partner. And I expect at some point in time, we'll probably find a local Naples charity. My wife and I went down to investigate one on Tuesday. So I guess that was yesterday. We're pretty excited about that as well. So we're going to keep the charity going, and we're going to hopefully sell a ton of books. And, the charity is important, but how it helps your life is the real important message in the book. And I promise you, if you buy the book, you'll be touched by the content.
I agree. And who doesn't love an autographed book as a gift for Christmas? Getting a book, but opening it and having your name written in there by the author, what a cool gift idea. So for anyone who is thinking about your family and your friends and people that, want to have good conversations around current events that are happening today and how we can come together and really have good conversation starters, Elliott's book is great for that. So I just want to say thank you again and encourage all of you to pick up a copy or 2 or 3 of From Fear to Fulfillment at Elliott's website or on Amazon or anywhere you buy books online. Thank you again for being on the show today, Elliott. Appreciate you.
Certainly the feeling is very mutual.
And we'll see you next time on our next episode of the I'm Book podcast. Have a great day, everyone.
So this has been another episode of the I'm Book podcast. I'm April O'Leary signing off. Be sure to hop on over to o'learypublishing.com to start your author adventure and see what writing a book could do for you in your profession, in your career, and what doors it might open. We thank our guests for being a part of the show today, and be sure to subscribe to podcasts here on YouTube. We look forward to serving you and helping you get your book out into the world.